A very good morning, very good afternoon. If you're online, whatever be the time, a very good day to all of you. I'm very happy to be in a very special seat close to three amazing women. And I'm very, very happy that I'm grateful to Dr. Bhavani Rao and Dr. Nancy Cruz, who actually enabled this panel. And our topic today, as you see with the three panelists here, will be on gender equity and sustainability in corporate landscape. I remove the word India for you because this is beyond India, but India is the center. Um, Often people ask us the question, what are we talking about? There's a core focus here that we think is part of our picture. One of the things is always the obvious question, gender in the workplace. And of course, this raises a question, which genders are biased, which genders are not biased. And today we ask the question, what about women in the workplace? And of course, we see a lot of successful women here, successful women everywhere in the world. But even with the latest figures, the McKinsey report says that the numbers have grown up, but it's not where we want it, especially compared to the UN 2030. This brings us to the question, what is this conference about? And we ask the question, gender and technology as a common system, and gender and technology as an influential common system that we think of. So I thought, just to throw it on all three of us, our panel focuses on these three sub questions, sub aspects of the question. One is technology as an enabler, or let's say as a barrier when it comes to gender in the workplace. Challenges in assessing technology, access and assess. And finally, the shaping the future of technology. And these are three questions that if I read MIT report, let's say this morning, which said AI systems had a very tiny margin of error when it came to men in the system, 0.8. And when it came to colored skins and also other genders, 34% errors in the system. So even a face detection or a simple act of using an AI based system today poses us some of these challenges that we never anticipated maybe 20 years ago. And this brings us to a very nice question. We have a large group of people coming from different disciplines. I can see people who have run major institutions. I can see people who are running significant policy making units. We have people from UNESCO in this case. We have people who are doing electroencephalography, EEG. People who are building devices, students who are thinking about different topics. So this question that we want to look at is sharply based on these three topics. And initially I had a plan that as a panelist, as a moderator, I would have the opportunity to introduce, which was Nancy's great idea that they'll talk more on the topic of their expertise. But I feel I will not be a great moderator if I don't allow them to introduce themselves. So may I please request Bindya, Alison and Rachel to actually give a self-introduction and tell us what you think is close to your heart in the context of this panel. Thank you.
Hi all, this is Bindya George. I have been in this industry for more than 22 years, and I think around 20 years I have spent with Wipro. So about me, I started my technology journey as a VLSI engineer. If there are electronics folks in this crowd, they would know what that is. It is about designing and verification. That's how I started with the system on chip. Most of you have your mobiles, so we work on to that chips manufacturing and other things. And of course, beyond the journey, right now I'm handling one of the semiconductor accounts within Wipro, and been handling more of the embedded side, the software, of course, the VLSI programs as well. And from the current perspective, I've also been part of the Wipro Kochi. I'm part of Kochi location. So I'm part of the Wipro Kochi Location Council, where we are focused on how to empower, how to grow the location, both with respect to gender as well as from the overall growth. And also I'm part of the Wipro Engineering's Women's Council. So here we present presentation sessions, mentoring sessions, panel discussion, just to ensure that people are aware, because there are a lot of things which people do, but unless it reach out to the entire population, it is of not much value. So I also belong to the Wipro Engineering Women's Council, who enable the same as well. So that's the key point about me. Yeah.
Alison.
Hello, my name's Alison Richards. I work for Intel Corporation as my day job. I also do some volunteer work with Amrita University for the technology business incubators. And I've been in high tech for many, many years. And I started off in software at the Santa Cruz operations, and then I moved over to Intel. And there at Intel, I'm now responsible for an open source project where we took a specification and put it under the Linux Foundation, the Unified Acceleration Foundation, to drive open heterogeneous compute across CPU, GPU, accelerators, and FPGA, which may be all a bunch of mumbo jumbo to you. So just what's near and dear to my heart about this, obviously, is, I've been a female working in a very male-dominant field for many, many years. And I spend a lot of time trying to mentor young women and also young men as needed to be able to move up in the corporation. And I'm volunteering also on how women lead, trying to get more women into the C-suite and onto corporate boards. So that's a passion of mine. And I think accessing technology, just in the context of India, is huge, because you can see if women, especially in rural regions, have access to technology, it will help them economically. But there's so much that needs to be done in the area of education, awareness, how to use this in the right way. And so I think that's one of the passion points I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison.
My name is Rachel Akohene, and I'm the Global Head of Employee Relations at BlackRock. And I'm an employment lawyer by background. In my entire career, even before I went to law school, I worked at a regulatory agency called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and it is just what it says. So my entire career has been dedicated to making sure that there's equality and fairness in people going to work. We all have to work, and making sure that there's a work environment that's free from harassment, free from discrimination, making sure that performance is evaluated objectively, whether you're coming in or you're going out. These are the tenets of what my career has been about, and also what I find interesting, and in terms of a passion point, somewhat static across my 20 plus year career. And kind of like what Alison said, I've been a woman for a very long time, and I've been female my whole life. So this is a passion project for me. And when I graduated law school, I heard so many stories of women before me who had difficulty, in their careers as they were branching out. And I was like, well, when I graduate law school, this won't happen to me. And it did. And I have a daughter now who is a freshman in college. And when she was born, I was so grateful that by the time she reached her career, that all of this would again be solved. And it hasn't. And so I'm here to the continuous dedication needed, particularly as we're at the advent of a new era with technology, and making sure that we continue to be persistent in our diligence with making sure that women and girls are included in this paradigm.
Absolutely wonderful. So this brings us to a very basic question, how this panel is going to run. I'm going to pose a few questions to them. As they finish the questions, at least one or two of them, we'll open up for questions. I mean, we are always open for you to ask a question to them, and they can answer it as well. But feel free to also stop us if you think there's an opinion that you want to pass on. So with that being said, Alison, this is the first question comes to you. How do emerging technologies like AI and machine learning empower women in corporate settings, and what safeguards that these technologies don't reinforce gender biases?
Well, there's a quote that talks about, I think it's from Amma, that says something about, with a knife you can kill someone, and with a knife you can also perform a surgery. So everything has the positive and the negative. And so, AI, obviously there's inherent gender bias, because whoever's training the system, which typically has been males, training the system, that's what's in. So if you get garbage in, you get garbage out. And so it's a very tough one, because you have to really look at the data sets and see what data is going in and how that's going to be looked at, which I think is a very tedious job. And you have to look at these models. But at the same time, I learned at this conference, and I wasn't really thinking about this before, that women that are applying for jobs now, they feel much safer and more secure applying, because there might be an AI looking at their application. And so they feel like they have more opportunity, and that's fantastic. But I don't think there's a definitive thing on, there's pros and cons to everything, and you really have to get into the details.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, what would your opinion be if you would be implementing this as a...
I think that if I was implementing something, I think one is getting more women to actually be working on training, and so that we can get the bias, not only women, but all genders and all people from all walks of life across the world. I mean, there's this big thing that everybody knows about, where I think they were talking about in one of the sessions, where if you have white males doing everything, then that's what is going to be recognizable, right? So, and the other thing, there was a paper or something that one of the employees at Hugging Face, a researcher, did, and it talked about especially Asian women. So if Asian women want to put in an avatar, it comes up, because the men that have been programming it comes up as some kind of anime porn. And this is horrible for an Asian woman putting in, an avatar and it coming up in that way just because it's been trained by men. So I think really at the concept, at the very early stages, making sure the training is done and it's inclusive from the beginning.
Thank you. I'll come back to you though. This is to Vindhya. So how has Wipro, your company, incorporated technology to drive sustainability and gender equity? You mentioned a few examples. In particularly, now my question is about leadership roles, because I think Wipro is one of the companies we respect a lot in India. And are there measurable outcomes you could share?
Definitely. I think when you start talking about diversity and technology, Wipro don't have a choice other than go to technology. We are 200,000 more than people across the globe. And if you have to reach to every one of them, technology invariably will play a very pivotal role. So to include with that, right? I mean, before we go into that, we need to first be self-aware. We need to be aware of where we are with our diversity index is first concerned. So the first point I have is that when we were doing that study, we kind of devised a Power BI dashboard. It's an A3 dashboard, which we call internally, which will give you the statistics at the leadership level. Now, this will tell me what it is, for example, for the team, how much is the gender diversity, how much is the people who's coming from the market in the hiring perspective, how much is the attrition, which is there from a gender perspective, across the various skill level or the experience level, because all this makes a difference. Now, this is more of a self-reflection to say, okay, this is my status quo, where do I stand? So that's the first usage, which I would say being self-aware, using the technology to do so. Now, once you're self-aware, the most important thing which Wipro has done is, what do you do about it, right? So since the question is specifically to the leadership role, I'll start from there. So a couple of things which we have been recently doing and working along with the CEO for that matter is that on a monthly and a quarterly basis, we do have a connect session with the leadership. So this way we can express our thoughts on what is going right, what is going wrong, what needs to be improved, what is facing on the ground, because we do see some things on the ground. So with this part, we also have started in the last 3 years. This is a year-long sponsorship program, executive structured sponsorship program, where a high potential leadership will be connected to an executive board person. So this will be a 1 year long mentoring where we'll be aspects of how to grow within the organization. Now, once again, I'm stepping one level back, and that's when we realized that yes, leadership needs growth, but what about the people below? Because these are the ones who are future leaders. And that's when we realized that we have to start young. So that's when we realized that there were people who were actually dropping out as they progressed to the career, especially from a gender diverse perspective. And when we realized that, we were checking what were the reasons for the same. And one of the reasons where, for example, you have your pregnancy, your maternity, the returning mothers. And there were cases where the returning mothers were not returning. They go, and then they get too much into the family life and other things. So that's when we realized that we need to do something about it. So a couple of things initiative we do, and this is my personal favorite, we call it WOW Mom. WOW is with Women in Wipro and Mom. So what happens in this exercise is, one is, of course, we have a mentoring session where the senior leaders, women leaders, talk to them on their growth, on their leadership, because they have also probably gone through this pain. Second is, we also have devised e-learning modules for the employees to understand what are the process policies which Wipro has implemented for them, and which can be used later when they come back. Also, we have process and others, because unless the process, policy, environment all go together, it is not of use. I mean, we can just implement and just keep quiet, but if the people is not getting implemented on the ground, it does not make a difference. So that is when we introduce e-learning for the moms or the to-be moms. But then we realized that there was a bias which is happening on the managers, because, and this was unconscious bias. They think they're doing good for the returning mothers by not giving them much work. But then ineffectively, it will be impacting their career growth. So that's when we realized we don't need just e-learning for the returning moms. We also need e-learning on this for the managers. And that is when there is a separate session to how to interact with them, how to grow on that. And that, I think, for the last 2 years has been what is implemented. We also have implemented something called Begin Again, because again, in our career, there are a lot of times where due to certain circumstances, women employees need to take a break. But then after 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, they may think, okay, let me return to the corporate life, and then they have a big baggage behind them. So this Begin Again program is purely for people who want to return to. So there'll be trainings, there'll be ramp ups, there'll be a little bit of a cycle time which is given, so that within 6 months, they are on par to where they left off. So this is another thing which we have done. Now, I can talk a lot more about this, and there's a Your Career, Your Choice, again for a junior bands, where they would be telling about you have to take control of your life. You have to take control of your career, right? And then people will be there to support you. And all these things, I believe, is reason when you're saying measurable outcomes. For the last, I believe, 15 years, we have been part of the Jones Sustainability Index. We are part of the Bloomberg Gender Diversity Index from 2020-ish. And we are also part of the India Workplace Equality Index, again from around 2021. Now, if I have to look at what is happening on the ground, if I have to give you some data from the ground, if you look at the senior leadership role, and if you go back to 2021, we were barely at around 7.9, 7.3%. And today, at this point of time, we stand at around 18.7. Right? So all these measures have enabled the growth, of course, from hiring, from the growth within the thing. The second thing I can talk about, I talked about this returning mothers. For the last 3 years, we are almost at 99+%. And I think the financial year 24, we reach 100%, which means to say that all the mothers who go for their maternity leave, come back, join the organization. And the other part, which you're talking about, the returning, the Begin Again program. And here also, when we were looking at the statistics, almost 80% have been in the company for at least 3 years. Since they broke from the work, came back, and then continue to stay in the organization. So there has been a platform which is there. And all this is not just a one-day job, because I believe this will be a long-term structured method. We have to lot to follow. We'll have to be accountable. People needs to be aware. People needs to have feedback mechanisms to all of them. And a lot of these things, we have to unfortunately have to use technology, right? There is no two way about it. So I think these are a couple of things. And just to add, I mean, which something which I am also proud of. And Wipro, right now we stand at around 37% from a gender diverse. And I told you, from VLSI, which is kind of a niche area under the electronic side, and where, of course, there are less people, but here we still are at around 35%. So I am personally very proud about it. And these are a couple of measurable outcomes I can think about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we directly jump in, I think two very, very valid points raised by both Alison and Bindia. Are there any questions directly to them on those points? We would like to take, if there is any input or questions to them, or can we wait until... Yeah, so Rachel, you're a starlight. So I'm going to ask you this question with... So BlackRock's focus on integrating diversity and inclusion into every aspect of employee relations is very popular, at least on the internet. How would you expand on this and tell us more on what you do, what your company does?
Thank you. I have to echo some of the best practices that Bindia talked about in terms of, we call them returnship programs, where we're having not just moms, but other people of non-traditional backgrounds who may have taken a career break or have had needed to take time off to care for parents or have had a medical condition, having a program where we invite employees back into the workforce is definitely a best practice. And then I want to also focus on a point about data and how important it is to have data. And of course, we all know what gets measured gets done. And so having a program, a returnship program is great, but are you tracking the efficacy of the program? You have amazing results. I am, kudos to you and your company for having this great returnship numbers. That's just incredible. I want to ask you a little bit more about it. But certainly part of what BlackRock is known for is using technology and incorporating that not just for our clients, but internally, particularly in human resources, and how we look at the employee onboarding experience. And of course, making sure, again, that all of our policies are fair, that they're inclusive. And again, not just saying it, but looking at the results of internal data to make sure that that's also the case. The second thing I wanted to just piggyback also on what Bindia mentioned in terms of best practices, sponsorship programs. There's been a lot of research on the difference between sponsorship and mentorship. And, mentorship, is someone else telling you how to do things better. And I think particularly with women in the workforce, I get kind of annoyed about that. People are always telling us what to do to get to be in leadership, and we're not the problem. And so the reverse of that with sponsorship and having someone deliver their political capital to be able to enable, to position, is Allison involved in that? I want Bindia involved, like someone actually putting their political capital on the table. These are things that show that there are results that we can measure in terms of women's leadership in the workplace.
One of the things that we very well know is all three of your companies have very prominent backing on the websites and front, talking about this transparency and gender inclusiveness. And how do you think this will change given the AI is coming in? Your points, but plus AI, how will it influence the choice of making better decisions?
I'll just quickly start and pass it over. One of the tenets of BlackRock's legacy is that 2 of the founding members were women. So if we think about, we said garbage in, garbage out, but equality in, women in, women's intelligence, our power, our strength in, this is what will come out. And the same thing, in my view, needs to happen, of course, with AI and technology.
Thank you. Alison, would you like to add on?
I was just thinking a little bit about, I think, at Intel, it's about one Intel and all employees being included. And so sometimes there's, on the corporate webpage, there might be something about, different types of employees telling their stories. And it could be as mundane as something about, their tattoos and featuring their tattoo art, or some cultural thing that's local from, a multinational site. One of the big things, obviously, was having gender neutral restrooms. And when I was leaving San Francisco, which is, known to be kind of cutting edge insofar as progressive on gender specifically, I noticed that there was a women's bathroom, there's a gender neutral, and there's a men's room. And I was like, wow, San Francisco, you don't see that everywhere in the world. So, and at Intel, that was something that happened pretty quickly too. There were gender neutral restrooms. So, insofar as AI though, specifically, I think that from the hiring perspective, and I think from training and health, obviously Intel's a very large company as well, 100,000 employees, so they use AI for many, many things internally. I'm not on that side of the house though. Yeah.
Yep. And just piggybacking on the point of the restroom, in fact, when we're doing in Wipro Kochi, I think that itself was a little bit of an awareness, because, we had this side, the male, the female, and then suddenly something got come up. And then like, what is happening? Because we already have restrooms. So it was more also of an awareness which people did get, though it's slightly deviating from the AI part. But I just have to, it was a awareness which also brought in to the location on the concepts included here. But again, coming back to the AI point, AI is definitely a double-edged sword. If not used in a proper way, there are a lot of things I think we have. In fact, I was just hearing the paper presentations where the same thing was getting used. From a Wipro perspective on an AI, couple of things I can definitely add on, and I think it is used from a broader perspective also, is right from the hiring perspective. Because at certain times, when you hire someone, there is always a bias which comes into picture when you see a resume. When you cut that part off, when I become a little bit of an anonymity into it, we go very crisp to the point. We just look at the credentials. And that is one area where the AI utilization is heavy. The two is, of course, we talked about the dashboard's analysis part, where a bit of this AI has to come into picture, because otherwise data is just data which is lying around. You can't use it unless you understand what is to be used for, unless you gain information out of it. So these are a couple of areas, talking purely from a gender perspective, which has to influence. Again, talking about the mentorship also. Now, in a mentorship, I have a career growth aspiration. Now, where do I reach? Who is the person who's going to mentor me? Now, if I tell that yes, this is my career goal, there's an AI implementation which is there, which will help me connect to my right mentor who can guide me right. Because I come from a VLSI background, I come from a semiconductor background, I come from an engineering background. Now, if there is a mentor who's in a different, of course, I do get a differential point of view. But if I'm having a senior who can understand the pain I'm going through on the ground, they can probably guide me better. So based on certain aspects, there is a matching aspect which also the AI will enable you to do. The same case with the learning programs. For example, based on my needs. Now AI will come into picture by device. I told you about the maternity part. Now if I'm not pregnant, why do I want to go through it right now? But I could be a manager, I need to do it. So understanding the perspective of it, the unconscious bias, because it could be across the globe. It could be right from your junior to your senior most CEO could have that. So being self-aware, showing that mirror is something, and that is where we have these gamifications, where we can have that interactive, understand, okay, my issue is on a negotiation skill. So we have an app in I Aspire, we call it internally as I Aspire, where what do I aspire to be? So they literally show me, I mean, from a joke angle, I kind of entered, okay, I want to be the CEO. So they literally told me, if I need to be a CEO, this is a possible career path or my right skills which I need to do to reach to that level. So I have a self-awareness, I have a path, I can definitely go reach out to my HR saying that I want to go do this. And that's one way which we can probably grow in our career. So these are areas which I feel, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, actually, on the training part, there are some required trainings that you have to take, and they have sensitivity training, unconscious bias training, and then there's some corporate trainings, and they could be ranging from AI and, kind of what are the policies around AI? Can you use AI for software, writing software or not within the company? Do you need approvals? How do you go through that? And the other thing I think is that it's key when you're thinking about sponsorship and the human element. There are certain things that can be mechanized, but I don't think it's ever going to take away two people looking each other in the eyes and having a conversation. Even though, during COVID we had to do that on Zoom more, but being in the same room and actually really talking and connecting as humans is completely different than what you're going to get, talking to Alexa or Siri or anyone else,
Can I just make two more points on that? This very interesting topic. There was some research done a couple of years ago on words used in hiring. So driven, ambitious, scored higher than collaborative and problem solving. And so making sure that our hiring programs or our hiring software AI is having an approach where gender-based language is being removed. That's number one. Number two, a personal anecdote. In college, in my large classes, I have very ugly anonymous handwriting. You can't tell if I'm male or female with my handwriting. And I just put my first initial on my large papers. And I absolutely got better grades on my anonymized papers than I did in a smaller classroom setting where, my gender was known. That was my own first research that I conducted a long time ago.
And that was not AI, is it?
Not AI, my own
Okay.
personal experimentation.
Okay. So, very interesting points, very significantly day-to-day life things. I'm curious about a few other questions, but before that, do we have questions? There's John can somebody pass a mic? comments, opinions, questions, everything is welcome.
Thank you. This is such a fascinating discussion, and thank you so much for your inputs, panelists. I'm Jency Teng from UNESCO New Delhi Regional Office for South Asia. You know, we've done some research 2 years ago the publication was titled "The Braided River," right? Looking at the universe of Indian women researchers and scientists. And I want to bring up an issue that, you know, wasn't the core of this discussion, but in the Indian context, in STEM, in highly male-dominated industries, patriarchal society, safety and the practices and culture of safety was a hugely important factor highlighted by the women scientists that we interviewed in this publication. And I think we all know the incidents that have happened in the past year, the past decade, the past decades. I want to ask, you know, in terms of innovative pathways, what kinds of policies, so corporate policies and practices, have you observed and have been implemented, you know, with technology, without technology, but have led to really concrete outcomes for improving women's safety? Because ultimately, we know that for India, that's one of the biggest maybe stumbling blocks or barriers to family supporting the women's choices as well as the individuals. So if we look at, you know, kind of ecological approach, individual, family, society, school, education, it's such an important factor. So safety, women's safety, and anti-harassment or, you know, harassment policies, how has that factored in? And maybe more from an innovative aspect, that would be really interesting to hear your answers. Thank you.
It's an amazing question. I'm just going to make sure that you talked about policy and practices that have led to better outcomes, and what are the individual related factors that enable this process, right?
One thing I'd just like to mention, one thing that immediately came to mind is, you know, one of the things we have at Intel is that anyone can put in an anonymous thing about harassment. So there is a website where they can just go ahead and pop something in, and they don't have to go to their manager, they don't have to go to any senior, they just put the tip in and HR gets this tip and follows up with them. So I think that's one thing, making sure that people are able to give something in an anonymous way about something that might be happening with them. And we are trained very clearly that there can be no kind of repercussions on anyone that brings up something like that. No retaliation, thank you. So that is very clear insofar as their job scope, you know, insofar as their earnings or anything like that. So that's one thing. The other thing that came to mind, and this is more from a technological perspective, but about how there can be more safety technology things, you know, with the mobile phone tracking, where people are going, or if, you know, depending, I don't know about in India, but people to go in the buddy system as needed if they're going somewhere together, if there's any kind of perceived threats. So I'll just leave it at that.
So if the anonymous complaint goes in, it comes to my team. So making sure that companies have internal investigation departments is very important in terms of promoting safety in a workplace that's free from harassment and discrimination. In India, of course, there is hearing managers, independent hearing managers, who are part of reviewing any type of misconduct at work. So those are, you know, very real policies that are put in place. An extra measure that I would recommend that companies engage in is at the end, whatever the annual compensation review process is there a way that the company reviews what is the mean of compensation increase or decrease if the company has a good year or a bad year, to make sure that those people who have raised concerns, whether or not they were valid or substantiated or not, but making sure that people who come forward and raise concerns, to make sure that their compensation at the end of the year is not impacted in a disproportionate way because they've come forward to raise concerns. And so all companies, most companies have anti-harassment policies, but again, do you have an investigation team who's charged and responsible for objectively reviewing these? Do you have independent hearing managers? And do you have practices internally that assure in a very real way that people who do come forward are safe and they're not being retaliated against?
I would do a +1 to the point because the same committee do be there in Wipro also. But just to add upon the point which was there, there is also a mechanism that once a case is investigated, actions taken, there is also a check which also gets done. Is it a trend for a particular team, a particular location, a particular geography for that matter? And then a couple of actions also getting taken based on that. So that would be the just adding to what they have to say. And a couple of other things also which I can think very basic is something is, for example, while transporting, especially there could be shifts because we work with US geography, the other geography. So there could be a time where the female employee may have to come and say at 8 o'clock in the evening and then leave by maybe 5 o'clock in the morning to cover the shift. So in these kind of things, we just ensure that along with the transportation, there's always a security guard involved, especially if the female employee is at the last person who to get out. That is a mandate. So if there is a female employee, we have to ensure that. So these are small things, but I think when it all adds up together is when that impact gets done. There is also a concept of buddy. I mean, just adding to, I think, to word. But again, this is both for male and female. But the concept of the buddy is when we are new to the organization, there are a lot of things which we are not aware of. There are a lot of things where we may not even know that I can even go raise a concern. Right? So during that time, having a buddy in place who connects with you on a regular basis, one, of course, to ensure you're settled down, your work is going well, you have a connect with your manager, but then this becomes a confidant who can actually connect with you and ensure you're aware what there is a gap on. So that is another thing which I feel that will, especially for somebody who's new and feel insecure to be in that organization, gets quickly assimilated into. So just to +1 +2.
We keep adding off of each other. Two more things that are part of that human experience is, of course, you're talking about a buddy. It's a very hard thing to raise a concern at the workplace. You're afraid. You're already feeling bad because you feel something bad has happened to you, and then you have to raise a concern in the workplace. One of the BlackRock's features is that we offer the opportunity for someone who raises a concern to bring somebody with them so they feel that kind of support. And then afterwards, we offer the opportunity to check in with them over a 1-year period of time. Are you okay? How are you doing? What's it like with your manager? Anything else come up? And so these are small ways, again, to increase, like raindrops in the bucket, to increase the feeling of safety of people raising concerns in the workplace.
Thank you. I mean, did some of them address your question? And is there anybody else? Dr. Nava, there's a mic request.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the question about AI, which is AI is a little bit of a black box to many of us still. So there are two critical elements to AI, which is the AI technology itself, the development of it, and then how that is implemented. For example, in this current setting would be about employee relations, for instance. If you could share how your company is positioned, the power that your company has, or any other, company together, corporates have on the development and implementation. I'm thinking about something like ChatGPT, where recently, some situation was posed and apparently the answer was, suggesting that the person should kill the parents because he wanted to know, how do I gain more freedom, right? So the ChatGPT came out with a message that was quite, suggestive. So I think what's not spoken or we need to have more discussion is who has power in the development of AI and the implementation. So why should I trust the company that, I'm going to be rated fairly, and I rock up with the manager and he goes like, look at your rating, So that sort of thing, if you could maybe give us an idea about empowering,
I'll just take for just one little minute about, there's two sides. There's training and there's inference. And, there's obviously software development. And the training side, is where something's training. So just for example, you could imagine an autonomous vehicle that's driving around with a person in the car. And the car has sensors all around and it's going around and it's training. You may have seen this in these Waymo cars or self-driving cars in different cities as they're training. And then once they're, kind of really functional, then they're out driving around with no one else there. And I think that the training part that we talked about, the garbage in, garbage out, really ensuring that real information and quality is there, and then checking those data sets is really, really important, as I'd mentioned before. And I don't know in terms of for the employees in the corporate, I'm not on that side of things, but I do think that with AI, like you can put things into ChatGPT and something will come out. But if we keep using all these things, the news that we might have, I read somewhere in a study that the news that might be coming out in 2 years could all just be fake news because all of that has been put in. And so if you have people that are putting in negative things about certain things, of course, that's where humans come in and have to have discrimination and actually check what's going on in data sets. So I don't think that AI is going to take over everyone's jobs because you're still going to have that human element of, people seeing what's going on and overseeing. But I'll give it to someone else about the employee context.
I can just share very specifically that in order to eliminate the garbage in, we haven't done it yet, but we're exploring using AI and an agent and giving them a closed data set, which is great examples of feedback, performance feedback that we've written, that we've prepared over the years, and giving the agent this data set to be able to help managers write better, clearer feedback, but in the way we want it done, high empathy and with respect and with dignity. And so instead of having it go out, we're, again, giving a closed data set to be able to control, if you will, what is going to happen in the output, but still, using AI to harness, enable managers to deliver better feedback for employees.
And yeah, just to add to it, one thing which we have implemented within Wipro, we have something called vServe, W-I and Serve, Wipro VI Serve. So what it does is, if you have a query, any query, we just put a question out there and say that, okay, I want to know what is my policy if I have to go on a industry injury leave, as simple as that. So and then we had a back-end team. We had 205 people who were actually just looking into it, typing out the answer. You can see in this policy, this is the answer to it. And when they did an analysis, they found that there were a lot of repetitive things which can be just looked at in the portal and they'll get the answer. So that's when this, a bot was implemented there, where the basic questions, of course, in multiple areas could be looked at because the language need not be. And then it will give you the answer. So according to what I've understood, around 70-80% of the question itself came down, the tickets came down, just because most of the things were basic questions which you could find in the policy document. So this was one implementation which we had done, which had a tremendous impact on to bring on to that. And other AI things, I think we are there. Unless you implement, unless you do something, there is always a possibility of error. We also have again, that is for a customer perspective, who actually reviews the content. And trust me, reviewing the content is not easy because there could be pretty trashy contents, there could be pretty contents which could mentally impact us. So there has to be a human element which has to come into there to validate and put a comment out here to go into the next level. So it cannot be a human pre-approach. Either ways, if from a gender perspective, from a Wipro perspective, or any corporate perspective, or even any other perspective, but it has to go hand in hand because it's definitely a double-edged sword.
Yeah, but I think it's the accountability that we need to work as a society. It's a lack of accountability, and that is, fearsome. Anyway,
just to, yeah, if I could just...
Can we come back? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Just to add to your question, in fact, it's quite interesting that ChatGPT, which is not very old in the world, when it was launched, I think the efficiency of ChatGPT was 70+%. When people started interacting with it and uploading information, the efficiency dropped down to 37%. So when you look at technology, we are actually tool makers by design as a race. Right? So technology or AI as of today is a new toy that we have. So it will go through its journey to develop, to a certain point. But the truth still remains that it is going to always be our intentionality of using tools, creating tools and deploying them with what intent do we actually engage with them. So yeah, I guess possibly if ChatGPT is saying that how do you attain more freedom by killing your parents, then clearly that's an indicator of what our social fabric is currently. Thank you.
One more and then we'll come back again. Will you pass the mic?
Oh, okay.
Oh, you have two here.
Oh, there's two more. Sorry. We'll come back anyway after that. We'll have another round.
I just had the mic.
Carry on, please.
You
Geeta ji,
talk
go
a lot about garbage in, garbage out. And so that means technology that's developed by the people in any organization from Wipro to Intel to Blackstone. BlackRock.
No, I think garbage in, garbage out is really the people that are training the AI models.
Yes, so what my concern is, a lot of organizations have decided that spending time and money on diversity and inclusion is no longer the work way. So how would that affect that whole garbage in, garbage out? Because then if people are not thinking of inclusion all the time, will it affect our technology?
I think it goes back to STEM and women in STEM and getting women, kind of participating in engineering and in other areas. And one of the ways that I think AI actually can help is help get people access to e-learning and training for STEM and to be able to do studies online. It can also help with healthcare. So there are some positives that can happen. But I think we need more women that are doing some of the creation of the products as well as doing the training.
Maybe we should take your question and then I'll
Hi.
split.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to add to the previous discussion that we were having about accountability and, that ma'am asked a question about, safety and accountability, where she shared an example about how ChatGPT gave a result about killing your parent. So I work for Fidelity International in AI, and what we do for all our internal tools, we have a very strict AI constitution and principles. So whenever an employee is engaging with an AI tool, it could be to ask about policies, it could be for any, because there are a lot of, productivity tools that are currently in play. So once the response is generated from the tool, it goes through a last check from the AI constitution and principles that essentially are set of guidelines that as an AI agent for, say, HR, you will not talk about sports, you will not talk about this, you will not talk about that. So there are clear guidelines that you will not engage in anything apart from policy-related questions or whatever the main material of that question is. So, and we do very rigorous testing to ensure that it works. For example, we'll ask it, how was the soccer game last week? And it'll say, I'm sorry, as an HR AI agent, I cannot tell you about the soccer game, or I cannot engage in a conversation about sports. So that's one area that, like in my organization, we are ensuring that, there is accountability and explainability in our tools that are being created.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. So that's something which lies in.
Yeah. So we'll come back to this very quickly, but I have another final set of generic things that we discussed. We thought, so Rachel, this is for you. Collaboration with educational institutions to develop gender-responsive corporate policies and sustainable. What would your advice be for us and for UN and any policymaker to tell us what to do next?
I think the point that we're all talking about here today is to make sure there's humans involved. What is the accountability? What is the feeling of safety? Where is the respect? Where is the DEI? These are all things that can only be accounted for through human interaction. And I agree with Allison that even with the advent of AI, humans are not going away and not going to take our jobs, and making sure that we continue to lean in and be persistent. Despite regulatory landscape changing and volatility in markets, and that making sure that we as women and men as allies continue to support, uphold, and be persistent in pushing for gender equality in our workplaces. Thank you.
If you have comments on the same question, but that was specifically to Rachel, if you have comments,
The very fact we're having a conference here on this topic itself is a testimony that what we should do. Because as I said, awareness, and this is something which is building an awareness to all the people in the audience and whoever is online. So I think that would be a good step.
The reason we asked this question is because India is a 1100 plus university country, and several other institutions depend on good ideas being told or passed on to them. I'm going to take a turn.
Excuse me, just one.
Yes, ma'am has a question. Sure.
Namaste. As a dancer, I have been showing a lot of legends on stage, and I see many of them reflecting what is happening in society, in life, in the world drama. What about harassment of women by women?
One of the things, I've had this happen in my career actually. My female supervisors, I've had some issues where there might be either jealousy or misunderstandings and they're not supporting you. And this organization that I'm part of, How Women Lead, they have a credo. And it talks about be fierce advocates for other women and help raise other women's voice. And I think taking some kind of a credo and understand that you don't want to have a cat fight with women, you want to support each other, because otherwise we're not going to help. I agree that we need the men to be helping us as well. But it's very, very important for women to see that this is a divisive thing. Otherwise, it's not going to help women. And I've seen that a lot in organizations.
Someone helped me with the Madeleine Albright quote. You can look it up on your phone. The data is still, nevertheless, that most people who harass women are men. And so I think it's important to still focus on equality, to focus on male allies, because the output is still very much that we are more supportive as women to each other than men are, and that's just the facts.
And I just for me personally, having been in tech for many years, they do all these programs for senior women leaders. And so the senior women leaders are in a room and we're talked at about, career stuff. But really these programs should be for the men in the corporations. Because the women, we don't need these programs. We really need the men to be trained about how to be better allies, sponsors, and mentors, and how to take the women along. So I think that's a big thing that many corporations could really focus on as well.
And just to bring another perspective, I mean, it need not be just women, because generally we have a perception that the men harass the women. There is also times where women harass the men also, right? So the policy covers 360 degree. Of course, the perception could be there, but so in generally when we raise, it's across men, female, all the combinations we can think of, in fact, beyond the 1-0 gender as well. So yes, that's equally important and very much important.
I've been just told that I'm supposed to close the session very soon. But if there is one more question from your side, we'll love to take it. Punita? Can you give a mic?
Thank you for your really insightful information. This is just a point that came up actually in one of the paper presentations this morning. And it was around HR and using HR tools in order to take out bias from hiring practices. But one of the really rich conversations that came up is that really doesn't address systemic bias that led up to a woman not having the same opportunity to publish articles, not having the same opportunity to go to elite schools, maybe having time off to have kids. So a resume will look very different. And if we're leaving our choices about who to even give an interview to AI, they're going to pick the shiny, sparkly diamond resume, which just further impacts systemic bias. So I would love to hear your thoughts about how to safeguard against that.
What you're saying is resonating with me, because by the time it gets to my team in employee relations, is it too late? Everything's happened before, even things happening before, things come in the door. So if we think about a circular or horizontal leadership method where the outputs from my team, or an employee relations team, which handles all of the problems, right? The outputs of that, the data, whether it's actual data or our experiences that we're informing all the rest of the horizontal of HR, the onboarding, the talent acquisition, reward. But I spoke a moment ago about making sure that the outputs of compensation and pay fairness. So there are ways that even though it might look like it's too late, that data can and still should be used at the other horizontals in the HR ecosystem to make sure that we're all trying and using that data to continue to enhance our policies and practices and achieving greater results in terms of gender equality in the workplace.
So I'm truly sorry to cut in, but was that part of the answer that you looked in?
I think that's part of it. It's part of it from the corporate level, but it doesn't so much address how, hopefully it addresses in some way the upfront of
How do you compensate if you're using some kind of technology to choose who you're interviewing? How do you build into that technology like an eye for you might not know the gender of that resume. It might look less fulsome than another resume, but it may be because there's a lack of opportunity, not a lack of talent of that person and skill. And when you're sitting, if you have the ability to pick and choose and you're a human being looking at those things, you might maybe take a wider spread. Maybe even that's a thing. You're going to take some percentage of ones that don't look as shiny because you might find out that they're women and they're super talented.
I think Europe and women in leadership positions and boards was very successful at looking at, I'm going to put it in quote because I don't believe that they were less competent, but looking at women who didn't have the same experience level. So having a broader approach or a non-traditional approach to talent is certainly something that BlackRock does, that I'm sure all of your companies do to make sure that we're expanding the scope. And then, of course, making sure we're talking about tech and data, there must be, all sophisticated human resources have views on what is the gender component of hires from all levels. And so that's something that companies can and should look for to assure that irrespective of humans making good choices or bad choices or shiny choices or unshiny choices, that that data and the output is that we're seeing that there's representative numbers in hiring and promotion, termination.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm going to have to close this question, but...
One. If I can.
Okay, please go ahead, if it's a short.
Yeah, I think this is the right opportunity to just put my word before you. Myself, Roshanara, I am an academician from University of Kashmir. I'm heading this Department of Women Studies. And this is more concerned with the day-to-day issues that we are confronting with. When we talk about, this work-life balance, this is a serious concern for all working professionals, especially women. But ultimately, we see whenever we see that we need to maintain a balance, or women face imbalance, and I would like to know from this August gathering that what more can be done. There are policies, there are programs, but I think a lot needs to be done. And this imbalance, it doesn't affect women only; it affects the men as well. It affects the society later and the economies later. But ultimately, there is emerging a need that we need to create such an ecosystem that will make women good professionals, that they can perform their roles as workers anywhere in any organization. But we need to give them a plenty of opportunity that they can be good mothers as well. Because right now the whole world is facing a crisis. Population is declining. Right now, it is take the case of South Korea, take the case of Japan, take the case of Russia, and they are now requesting women, you please do something, take care of this thing, take care of that thing, and you just give birth to babies, because the world has shaken now. And I think it is the time that organizations as well, the academia and the people who are at the important forums, they need to just do something concrete, something constructive that will help us to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful question, but I'm going to use that as the last one to also request you to conclude with some takeaway points for her and for us all. Please go ahead.
On a lighter note, I would just want to answer that there is a limit what we can do right now. your next generation, the people in the audience, and the next generation, your kids are growing up. Groom them to respect each other. It doesn't matter what gender it is. Groom them, I think that is what would make the difference in future. And concluding, I think the two words which I would want to say is, there is definitely, and that is the elephant in the room, where we have challenges. But how do we all come together? And I'm just not talking about corporate, but all, including the academia, to come together, to understand, be self-aware, take actions, implement, self-evaluate, and then take further actions is what I would want one of the takeaways to it. And technology, enabling that, is just what is going to make the next level difference. Thank you.
I would say, I don't know if work-life balance really exists, in all honesty. But if you're smart and you get a good partner that can cook and pick up your child and take them to the doctor, then that's why I'm here. Like, my husband's home with our son, right? And so I think my kid, he knows how to cook. He can make some food on his own. I have to teach him how to do the laundry still. But, I'm working on it. It's just all a work in progress. So we just do the best we can and hope that we're setting the right stage for the next generation.
I'll just a very short note about authenticity. When I started my career, I had put wore the shoulder pads because I wanted to look more, less feminine. And I also would answer the phone like this. I'd lower my voice. And now, many years later, I'm wearing pink and my hair is longer and I have lip gloss, and it doesn't make me any less smart or any less powerful. And I think it's important as women leaders, whatever stage you're at, to embrace your femininity. There's a strength and a power in it.
I think a loud set of applause is expected very soon. Please give your gratitude in terms of an applause to the three wonderful panelists and to the amazing questions. We are very grateful to all of you. Lots of notes to be made. We have lots of questions. We have ideas that I should be channeling back to Dr. Bhavani and say, now this is your homework to do. But we are quite happy that there is a corporate understanding of what we have as a problems in academia as well. And I believe some of the lessons that you have already started implementing, we need to also bring it in across other domains. With that, once again, thank you so very much, Rachel, Alison, and Bindia. Thank you all for being here as part of this team, and thank you for being patient with us. Thank you.